Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. I am your host, Phoenix. Happy spooky season. To all of the elites, thank you for your love and dedication. It is reciprocated. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in to get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Creepy Encounters. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Right after the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. In my teens, I had my fair share of encounters with creepy older men. And after the last one, I'd figured I'd share another one. This happened when I was 15, over a decade ago. Boy, I'm starting to feel old. I've told this particular story to my friends for years, but I've never told anyone else. There were a lot of long stretches of industrial areas in the town I grew up in. Large plazas with big parking lots stuck next to one another, and wide open stretches of roads and highway. The majority of my town felt like the area before an airport, flat, gray, and functional. As a depressed teenager, I used to go out after school a lot by myself. At first, it was within my neighborhood, but it eventually escalated to me leaving the quaint residential areas to walk an hour or two in any direction. I'd usually make my way home before dark, and I had a trusty flip phone at the time to call my parents if I needed to. Generally, I felt pretty safe walking on the main streets because of how populated they were. There were always plenty of cars on the road and quite a few pedestrians out and about. One early summer evening, at about dusk, I was making my way home from one of my walks. It was a route I'd taken many times, and I was about a 40-minute walk from home. I was just passing a parking lot when a car pulled out in front of me. I stopped about 2 feet from the vehicle to let it turn onto the road, but the driver rolled down his window. "Hey, how are you?" he asked. The man looked to be in his late 40s and greeted me with an unsettling enthusiasm. I wasn't sure how to respond, but since I couldn't pass his car, I hoped he just needed directions or something. I'm okay. How are you?" Before I could even finish my response, he said, "I love your style. Goth girls in boots are one of my fetishes." I'm not paraphrasing. Now, as I said, I'd been approached quite a few times by creepy men, but this guy was beyond bold. I had absolutely no idea how to respond. Just as I was trying to formulate a response, a car pulled up behind him, meaning he was blocking another vehicle from exiting the parking lot. There's a car behind you trying to get out," I told him, relieved that I now had a way to get out of the conversation. "I'll meet you over in the next parking lot," he exclaimed. As I tried to tell him no, that I needed to get home, he drove off. In my mind, there was no way he could be serious. I continued walking, but sure enough, he was in the next parking lot. The parking lot he'd entered was down a bit of a hill, and he was standing beside his car. As soon as he saw me, he started waving me down. I'd been followed by cars before, and I was generally afraid of the idea of making a man angry and being stalked to my home. I assessed the situation. He was parked about 10 feet from a dive bar, and there were about 15 men outside on the patio. That meant they could see me and would be in earshot if I screamed. I weighed my options between going down to meet him versus potentially being followed home, and made the stupid decision to walk down the slight incline. I honestly don't know why I didn't just pretend to be on the phone or call my mom. I don't remember what he said when I approached, but I kept my distance from him in his car so I wouldn't be easy to grab. He walked around to his trunk, and I felt myself tense up and take a step back. Then he pulled out a pair of women's boots and approached me slightly to show them to me. They were lace-up, about mid-calf, maybe size 9. "Nice, aren't they?" he asked. Yeah," I responded hesitantly. They were not nice, but my brain was on autopilot. "Want to try 'em on for me?" he asked, grinning. I was absolutely stunned. More than scared, I was completely baffled that this was actually happening. "I think I'm a little too young for you," I managed to stammer out. "No. You're what, like 20? "I'm 15. All the blood left his face as he finally realized he'd made a mistake. He quickly put the boots back in his trunk and said something to the effect of, I'm sorry, you're just so hot. I shouldn't be saying that. You're 15. I kind of laughed it off and exited gracefully. He drove out of there well above the speed limit. I was relieved, but left absolutely bewildered and creeped out. Why was he carrying around a pair of women's boots? How many women had he approached? What the fuck just happened? What would have happened if I'd been over 18? Why did his brain think that what he just did was okay, even if I had been old enough? I still can't wrap my head around everything that happened, or if he thought that would actually work, even with an adult woman. I'm in my late 20s now, which means that if he approached me today, he'd probably be more insistent, which in his case, it wouldn't be the best idea for him to approach me in this day and age. This happened a few months ago. It was a few days after Christmas, and my mom had asked me and my girlfriend to house sit and watch the dogs for her while she went on vacation for a week with her boyfriend. We agreed, and the first few days were pretty uneventful. My mom's house is on the edge of a rural upstate New York town, so really the only big thing that ever happens is road work. It was probably the third night there. My girlfriend and I were on the couch. She was on her phone and I was playing Pokemon Shield on my Switch. It was around 12:30 a.m. when suddenly we heard footsteps from outside. Someone with really big, heavy boots and stepped onto the porch. The way my mom's house is laid out, there's a couch against the wall with windows on either side. On the other side of that wall is the front porch, so this guy was right behind us. He stomped around for a bit, then got really close to the window on the left side of the couch and grunted, "Shit, fuck," in a deep, angry voice before stomping off. My girlfriend and I froze. After about 5 seconds of processing what had just happened, we got up, turned off all the lights in the house, and went to the laundry room where we knew no one could see us. After a little while, I decided to go into a different room and look out a window to see if it was safe to turn the lights back on. When I looked outside, I saw a big burly guy shuffling down the sidewalk opposite the house. In his hands was a plastic bag. Keep in mind, this was 12:30 a.m. in a rural backwater town. None of the stores were open for him to have just gotten one. He continued this awkward shuffle while holding the bag, then suddenly started moving really nimbly, almost cartoonishly, across the street toward a parking lot near my mom's house, and then disappeared. I went back to the laundry room where my girlfriend was waiting and told her what I saw. I brought her to the window to look for him again, but he was gone. We checked other windows around the house to see if he was outside any of them. My girlfriend was looking out a window on the other side when she said she saw him again, this time walking away. We started to discuss whether or not we should call the cops, when suddenly there was a knock on the door on the opposite side of the house. We ran to that door and could hear the doorknob jiggling. Thankfully, it was locked. One of my mom's dogs started barking like crazy, a small rescue with a loud, ear-piercing bark, who growls at anything unfamiliar. I think that noise scared the guy off. We called my mom to ask what to do. We debated calling the cops, but the police in our area were notorious for not really doing their job, so we decided against it. My mom also encouraged us not to, thinking it was probably just someone drunk or high who didn't know what they were doing. While it wouldn't have been the first time someone showed up drunk at the door in the middle of the night, gotta love small towns, right? I don't think that's what this was. I don't know what that guy's intentions were, but man, I'm glad I never found out. Almost a year ago, I was fresh out of college and had just moved into an apartment with my middle school bestie and her fiance. This was after a long period of not seeing her in person. My bestie and I had always had a long and great relationship with only a few rocky periods. I didn't know her fiance well, but I'd met him a couple of times. He came off as kind of rude and loud, but mostly nice enough. I let a lot of little annoying behavior slide because she was in love with him. I really just wanted to spend time with my best friend. Over the course of a few months, I slowly discovered that she was trapped in an abusive relationship with the most classic example of a malignant narcissist imaginable. Their fights, really just him raging at her while she cried, escalated to the point where he was completely trashing the apartment, breaking her phone and laptop, hiding her car keys, blocking the door, and grabbing her arms so hard she had bruises, all while hurling the worst insults he could fathom at the top of his lungs for hours. This man was about a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, so there was nothing I could do other than give her a ride somewhere else to get away from him until the next day. He didn't like it when I did that. Once it reached a point of physical harm against her, I put my foot down and demanded that he move out or I would call the cops. He wasn't technically signed onto the lease, so I could have him kicked out. He begged for time to find a new place. He was extremely drunk and high the night he heard her, and he promised to stay sober until he moved. Not wanting to escalate things, I agreed, on the condition that nothing like that ever happened again. My friend and her fiance broke up soon after that. 3 weeks passed and everything was going great. The ex-fiance found a new place, was in training for a new job, and while still loud and inconsiderate, he hadn't caused any problems. I got ready for bed early because I had an important meeting the next morning. I put on some comfy pajamas, locking my door before I changed, just out of habit. My bestie was out working, and it was just me upstairs in bed and her fiance downstairs yelling on the phone about something. I tuned him out and tried to sleep. He was moving out next week. My chest rattled from the booming footfalls up the stairs to my room, waking me from sleep. My eyes snapped open to see my bedroom doorknob rattling back and forth. Locked. He let out a yell of pure malice and banged on my door. He screamed my name, and it was so slurred he sounded like he was trying to impersonate a lizard man. The hinges weren't looking so good. We lived in a crappy, cheap apartment with thin doors. I had to do something before he broke it open, right? I said the only thing I could think of. What the fuck? Suddenly, the banging and screaming stopped. My doorknob fell still. After a terrifying moment of silence, he said flatly, "Open the door, bud. Just come and open the door." I still laugh about that one. Like, after all that, I'd just walk over and open up. Instead, I grabbed my essentials and jumped out the window. I was on the second floor, but we lived on a hill, so the fall wasn't quite that high. I still managed to fall all wrong. I hobbled as quickly as I could to my car and peeled away. I called my best friend and warned her not to go home. We had plans for her to stay with a friend after she got off work. I made it to that friend's house and passed out for a few hours. I woke up to a call from my bestie. He had traveled all the way to her workplace with a knife and broke in. He assaulted her and held the knife up to her special needs client's throat, saying he'd kill him in front of her. Thank God a coworker overheard everything in another room and was able to call the police in time for everyone to come out alive. My bestie also said he had been on the phone with her while he was banging on my door, and he had said he was going to kill me and make her listen. I was totally alone in the apartment with him, sleeping upstairs in my bed. If I hadn't locked my door that night, would I even still be alive? If I had left my car keys downstairs, would I have been able to get away? When I returned to my apartment the next morning, my bedroom door was completely kicked in. My belongings were scattered everywhere. The large butcher knives were missing from the kitchen. Instead, they were sitting in the corner of the hallway leading to my room. Okay, so this is going to be a long story, and I'm also bored and lonely, and it's quarantine. I'm a writer, so I tend to be long-winded at times. Here's my story. I went from being a social butterfly when it came to dating to a nearly paranoid hermit. Here's why. I'm 30. I've been on a lot of dates throughout my adulthood, mostly because I enjoy meeting new people and, I suppose, psychoanalyzing them. That sounds odd, but I majored in psychology for a reason. I just think humans are fascinating. Of course, I have certain criteria. No hardcore drug users, no creeps, and definitely no one old enough to be my mom. I could go on, but you get it. This approach has its positives: networking, making new friends, playing matchmaker, and gaining insights on dating in general. Sometimes someone surprises me and turns out to be nothing like I had imagined. Maybe their photos were bad, or maybe I knew them from work or a formal setting, and their personality was completely different in a casual tone. Even if it doesn't work out, it's cool when that happens because it reminds me not to judge people and to keep an open mind. So, I've been on bad first dates, so bad that they've become awesome stories, perfect for cheering up friends. When I'm down from being single, I even think about these and have a laugh. Here's my favorite. It's funny and might lift your mood after you finish it. Once I went out with a recently discharged Marine who had just relocated from another state. We got pulled over in a small town for speeding, and he was taken to the station in cuffs because of a speeding ticket that hadn't been marked as paid back where he was from. He actually had paid it. He later proved it to me because we dated for a short time afterward. But at the time, the cops wouldn't tell me why he was arrested. We joked about it later, but it was mortifying. The cops had to give me a lift back to my car because I couldn't drive his old standard truck. They gave me a very patriarchal lecture, and he was freaking out because he liked me and thought I'd never talk to him again. After he was released, he refused the cop's offer of a ride and walked 4 miles back to his truck. He was a true gentleman, very traditional cowboy type, Stetson hat that came off when he ate, boots and Levi's, white t-shirt and flannel shirt. Kinda looked like a young Tom Hardy, now that I think about it. Maybe that's why this is my favorite bad first date story. Once we went to a river for a picnic and his truck got stuck. We had no cell signal, so we had to hike through the national forest for miles to call for help. A mountain lion ended up following us. Thankfully, we had a concealed carry, a very old school revolver, and I honestly felt like I was in a Western movie. He was protective and knew exactly what to do. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because he took another girl to the same spot and got stuck again. Someone who helped pull his truck out the second time contacted me to let me know he was two-timing. In his defense, I sent mixed messages about dating other people and lived a few hours away. He was probably a little young for me anyway. Anyhow, thanks for the stories, Marine Cowboy Tom Hardy doppelganger. But that's all kid stuff compared to my central story. I was on a dumb dating app, not intending or expecting to meet anyone, because I was happy being single and had just ended a relationship with an emotionally draining person. But, as I said, I'm curious about people and open-minded. That's what came back to bite me. I agreed to go on a date with a guy who shared a lot of my interests. We had the same ethnic background, Romanian, which is rare where I live, and we even had the same birthday. He was very into astrology, tarot, mythology, and paganism, but also science-minded. He approached all of it from an academic rather than religious perspective. I was excited. That's rare in my very religious town. We actually spoke on the phone before meeting, something I always insist on to weed out weirdos. In hindsight, the first weird thing was that after we hung up, he called me back despite me saying I was going to bed. I let it go, thinking maybe he didn't see my text. Fast forward to the first meeting. I asked if he wanted to meet at a very populated local park. He agreed, but suggested we sit by the tennis courts specifically. They're located a few houses away from the main park, technically owned by our local university. That becomes relevant later. I asked if he liked tennis. He said yes. I asked if he wanted to play. He said he didn't have any equipment. I figured maybe he just liked watching people play. Odd, but not a red flag. Yet. I got there before him and watched people play for a while, thinking maybe he picked this spot so whoever arrived first wouldn't get bored. Then, he spooked me. 1 second he wasn't there. The next, he was right beside me, introducing himself. I was very observant of my surroundings. He told me which direction he'd walked from. And to this day, I don't know how he did it. I'm usually the one who sneaks up on people, so this shook me. I was totally disoriented. His photos hadn't done him justice. In person, he was very attractive. But in his pictures, his smile looked off, forced. I didn't see that in person at all, which made me think maybe I'd been too judgmental of people's photos. Hindsight, I wasn't. At first, things were awkward, on his end. My style is just to say hi, introduce myself, and start talking like we'd known each other for years. Most people love that. But he was different. On the phone, he'd been chatty, witty, imaginative. In person, he was cold, condescending, and strange. He mocked the teens playing tennis nearby for not following the rules, openly checked out other women, and made odd defensive comments. For instance, he said his goal for the month was to not spend money on beverages, but still drink coffee. When I teased him that coffee was a beverage, he got irritated and said coffee was a necessity. And since he made it the night before, it didn't count. Then he said he followed a strict diet because he liked knowing exactly what it would look like when it came out. I must have looked confused because he clarified, when you shit. At that point, I wondered if maybe he had some kind of social disorder. But something about it just felt off. Not like autism, just wrong. So I decided he was probably just a jerk trying too hard to seem deep. I told him I had to get home to check on my ball pythons. Great way to creep out creepy guys, and I actually love them. Before leaving, he told me I had an orange-brown aura. I said that was cool because I love being outside in autumn. He just stared at me blankly. Then, because apparently I enjoyed testing fate, I offered to drive him home since he'd walked. It was only a 2-minute drive. I parked in front of his house, and he asked me out again for Thursday. It was Monday. I politely declined. I could tell he was debating whether to kiss me. He asked how I felt about a goodbye kiss. I said I had no feeling one way or the other. That clearly pissed him off. He suddenly started criticizing my appearance, saying I looked heavier and darker in person. I'm mixed race, ethnically Jewish and Native American, and that comment really pissed me off. I laughed it off and said, well, hey, I've been in the sun all week, and wished him a good night. He got out and said, I bid you adieu, not the French kind, but spelled that way. I said, if it's spelled that way, it's French, and drove off. Then immediately bought a milkshake and mozzarella sticks. I texted a few guy friends to ask if I looked heavier in person. I'm ashamed I even asked. The answer was a resounding no. Fuck that guy, they said. He's just mad he didn't get laid. I wish the story ended there. But something about him lingered in my mind. The unblinking eye contact, the cruel negging, the dark vibe. So I Googled him. He was on the sex offender registry for soliciting sex from a 13-year-old when he was 23. He's 38 now. And if that wasn't bad enough, he'd also broken probation by pleading guilty to stalking and spent 120 days in jail. Court documents revealed he'd stalked a college student he didn't even know, followed her to class, on the shuttle, and around campus. He got expelled and banned from university property for life. The next morning, he texted me apologizing for the bad vibes. I replied, no worries, good luck out there, because I didn't want him angry at me. I reported his profile and the dating site took it down. He messaged me again. If you had an issue with me, you could have just told me. I played dumb. He ended up confessing everything and I pretended to be sympathetic. Said I had a family member on the registry for peeing outside. A lie, though my cousin almost got in trouble for that as a kid. After that, he stopped contacting me. Thank God. I later realized he chose the tennis courts because sex offenders can't go to parks with playground equipment. And the orange aura? In most interpretations, orange represents sexual energy. Since I don't post revealing photos, my non-teenage body probably turned him off. Vomit. The diet thing likely came from spending months in a cell with a toilet. You smell your waste constantly. Maybe you can buy air freshener on commissary. I should consult Orange is the New Black. As for his strange social behavior, it fits antisocial personality disorder more than autism, according to one of my old psych textbooks. I was traumatized. I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. On the phone, he'd been one of the most normal, charming people I'd ever spoken to. In person, something else entirely. If you'd told me there was a sex offender messaging me, he would have been the last person I'd guess. Now I pay for background check membership and refuse to meet anyone from the internet without running one. Paranoid? Yes. Peace of mind? Also yes. Thankfully, he doesn't know where I live or my full name. And I just installed a Ring security system the week we started talking. Long story short, I talked to someone online who seemed great. We spoke on the phone, totally normal. Met in person, completely different vibe. Googled him, turns out he's a convicted sex offender and stalker. I reported him. The site removed his profile, and I narrowly dodged what could have been a dangerous situation. Now, go back and reread my funny date story. I'm going to believe there are still more Marine cowboys in the world than creepy coffee brewing aura reading registered sex offenders scouting for gullible women. I used to deliver pizzas for a pizzeria in Cape Town, South Africa, back when I was in university to make some extra cash. I would deliver to the same house quite often. Incidentally, it was pretty close to where I lived at the time. There was nothing overtly strange about this place, except that whoever received the pizza would always take a long time to come to the door. They'd also ask me to pass the pizza through the security gate instead of unlocking it, which would have made things much easier for everyone. One quiet night, a call came through for that same house. I collected the pizzas and got there reasonably quickly. This time, a lady I had never seen before opened the door and actually let me in. That wasn't entirely uncommon, so I didn't think much of it. She pointed me toward the kitchen, which was down a long corridor, and asked me to drop the pizzas off there. She followed right behind me the whole way. Still nothing weird. The passage opened into an open-plan dining and lounge area, and through that space was a kitchen off to the left. As I passed through the dining room, I saw something that still sticks with me to this day. There was an old-looking dentist chair with a person lying on it. Whether this guy was alive or not, I still don't know. He had a sheet covering his entire body, except for the very top of his head and his feet, which were duct taped together. I couldn't tell if he was breathing. The woman who let me in was still standing silently behind me. She said absolutely nothing. We went into the kitchen. She paid me for the pizzas, and I was bracing myself for anything. An attack, someone else jumping out, or the guy under the sheet suddenly moving as part of some sick prank. Not wanting to give anything away, I stayed quiet and prepared myself to either defend myself or stay calm if it was a joke. I walked back toward the front door, double-checking to make sure I'd really seen what I thought I saw. The woman followed me the whole way, said nothing, and quietly closed the door behind me as I left. To this day, I still have no idea what was happening in that house. Maybe it was some kind of twisted joke, but I really don't think so. The presence of that dentist chair made no sense. I didn't see anything else in that house that suggested the residents were collectors of odd or vintage things. I still drive past that house from time to time, and every single time, I wonder if I was in danger that night. Back when I was 18 or 19 years old, I was house sitting with a girl I was studying with. The family we were house sitting for went to the same church as her, but I didn't really know them well myself. I was mostly there to keep her company in a huge house. This was in 1997, when the average teen like me didn't have a cell phone. During the week we were house sitting, it was a short break in the school calendar. That's why the family was away and why the streets in the area were quieter than usual. My apartment, as well as the house we were watching, weren't far from the university. My apartment was only a 3-minute walk from campus, and the house was about 5 minutes away by car. Being a student neighborhood, it was particularly quiet that week. The first weird thing that happened was a dream. I dreamed I was driving through a dark forest on a winding, hilly dirt road with no lights anywhere except for my car's headlights. As I started down a hill, the headlights suddenly went out, and everything went dark. The car slowed to a stop and died. Then I woke up. The next morning, I went out to my car, and it wouldn't start. It had been working perfectly the day before. I had to call a guy to come fix it. It turned out to be the starter motor. That was the first creepy thing that happened that week. A day or two later, it was Friday. I planned on driving back home to my parents, who lived in a smaller town about 45 minutes away. I packed up my stuff at the big house and was going to head over to my apartment to collect whatever else I needed for the weekend. The trip between the house and my apartment was, as I mentioned, only about 5 minutes. Since it was winter, it was already dark by the time I left, which was around 7 p.m. As I was driving from the house, I noticed in my rearview mirror that the car behind me was tailing me really closely. When I turned, it turned. Back then, I was cautious, but not overly so. Still, I noticed quickly that something weird was going on. But then, when I pulled up to a traffic light, the car wasn't there anymore. Relief. Short-lived relief. The car was now beside me. I looked to my right, and there was a man inside. Alone. Smiling at me. His grin was strange. Almost manic. For a moment, I thought, geez, I should really drive with a beanie on at night so maybe people can't see me. I'm a petite 5'2" female with long blonde hair down to my waist. I also figured he was in the lane to turn right, so I was good. But when I pulled off, his headlights appeared behind me again, so close I could barely see them over the back of my car. What an ass, I thought. Who drives like that? Thank goodness my turn was coming up soon. After another minute or two of this tailgating, I slowed down, strategically didn't indicate, and made a sudden sharp left into my driveway. I opened the automatic gates and shot inside. The gates closed behind me. Yay, the drama's over. I gathered a few things from the car to take upstairs and noticed, as I was walking toward the stairwell, that there was a man at the gate that had just closed behind me. He was still on the other side, and I was at the far end of the parking lot. But I could make out that it was the same guy from the car. He was jumping up and down, shaking the gate with absolute rage. I wasn't completely gripped with fear. I was safely on my side. And besides, there was a group of students nearby making noise as they arrived for a party. I headed for the stairs and started climbing from the ground level to the first floor. As I rounded the stairs, I noticed someone running across the parking lot toward the staircase. In hindsight, I can't fathom why I didn't put two and two together. I guess it was because I subconsciously knew that there was a big group being let in through the pedestrian gate. As I was rounding the staircase between the second and third floors, someone suddenly touched me. I spun around. The guy. He had slipped in as part of the small crowd. He said something. I snapped back something sassy and told him to fuck off. Then I turned my back to continue up the stairs. I lived on the third and top floor. He grabbed me from behind, held my back against his chest, his left arm around my neck. I felt something pressed against my right side. Ah, shit. A knife. He forced me downward. I remember thinking that the light on the bottom level was broken. This can't end well. But I stayed calm. I resisted slightly. He tightened his grip. I felt like I wasn't getting enough oxygen. I started to go limp. Dead weight. He began to drop me. I was at groin level. I elbowed him hard. It connected. He dropped me, but spun around to face me, ripping the front of my button-down top. Then he stopped. He looked at something, or someone behind me, someone taller than him. His eyes went wide. Then he turned and ran. I screamed. Then I turned too, to see who had come to help. There was no one there, but people came out of their apartments after that. The police were called. It was the second time they'd been there that night. What? It turned out that my dad had already called them earlier. My mom had had a weird feeling all evening and had hassled my dad endlessly, insisting that something bad was going to happen to me. She had been right. As it turned out, they caught the guy. I identified him in a lineup. He was a serial rapist in the area, accused of attacking around 14 women. One had even thrown herself off of her first-floor apartment to escape and broke her leg. Weeks later, the police called me again. Before his trial, his cell door had been left open. He was gone. Apparently, an inside job. Oh, and a quick edit here. I kept the more graphic details of the actual encounter on the stairs out of the story so as not to distract from the creepy aspects. I haven't shared this story with many people, so I decided to write it down. Here's that story. A bit of a backstory first. For a little bit of a backstory, I'm currently a 27-year-old female at the time of this writing, but the encounter I'm going to describe took place when I was 21-ish. When I was 21, I moved to a new city for school. I didn't know anybody, and I was suffering the typical first time away from home loneliness. A lot of this had to do with being separated from my best friend for the first time, and I was desperate for some companionship. I took to dating apps to try and build some sort of bridge. I had a couple of dates, which ultimately didn't work out, but I guess that isn't so important. I matched with this one guy. He seemed like the whole package. He was cute, he was into music and art, and we had a mutual love of Stephen King. We talked for about a week, and eventually we exchanged numbers and continued talking in more depth. I was young and naive enough at the time to catch feelings for this guy, and I honestly thought I was falling for him. We talked in depth for about another week. He got to know me very personally, and it was scary to me how much we had in common. The fateful first date. We made a date to meet at a bar. He told me he was running a little behind and to go ahead and have a drink at the bar, and he would meet me there. It was sort of late afternoon, so the area was fairly empty. There were 2 other girls that showed up at the bar during my time there. One of the girls broke our silence by saying that she was here for a first date with a really cute guy and she was nervous. She asked if the other girl or I had any advice for her. Oh, how cute. I was there for the first date too, that I was extremely excited about. The other girl was also there for a first date with a guy. We shared our thoughts and really hyped each other up. It was a total sister bonding moment. That was until we all drew the conclusion that we were all 3 to meet the same guy. Same pictures, different names, different personalities. This guy played us in a big way. Believe it or not, this was actually a huge letdown that turned into something good. The 3 of us ended up hitting it off naturally, and we actually stayed at the bar and talked. Since then, the 3 of us became really close, and both of them are serving in my upcoming wedding. We just clicked over the mutual embarrassment. One of them actually lives with me, and we truly became best friends. Now, on to the subject of my wedding. Over the weekend, I had my bachelorette party trip. My fiancé had his bachelor party trip over the weekend as well. He and his friends were staying at a fishing camp, while my friends and I were at an Airbnb not very far away. It wasn't a huge trip or anything like that. We just wanted to have a good time. Well, we were really enjoying ourselves. I had to go shopping one day at a nearby store, where my longtime best friend and 2 other best friends joined me. Not to give TMI, but I had to go buy a new bra. That'll probably be relevant in just a bit. The Bachelorette Bombshell. That night we're playing cards against humanity and having some drinks. It got to the portion of the evening where my mom wanted to go around the room so everyone could tell how they met me, share a cringe story or anything they wanted to share. I wasn't looking forward to that, but it's customary. And oh, did it lead to something. One of my best friends, one that I had met at the bar, came forward for her turn and laid quite the truth out on the table. So apparently, that day where the 3 of us showed up for a date with the same guy was completely and meticulously orchestrated. She was having trouble making friends of her own, and she noticed me and the other girl at school. She made a fake dating profile after apparently hearing the 2 of us mentioning it at some point, and essentially stalked the app until she found us. This is how she got to know us, which is why we were all able to hit it off so easily. She orchestrated this whole thing in order to make friends. Her cadence and her delivery of the story were so damn strange. It was so creepy. First of all, it's a big revelation, and it's a strong relationship built on deceit. I honestly felt violated and very uneasy. My mom cut through the tension by changing the subject. Processing the creepiness. Later, I was outside playing my guitar when my best friend and the other best friend, I'm sorry, I could have given them alternate names, came outside. We discussed it and also mutually agreed that it was really weird, and she picked a hell of a time to drop this bomb. So many things that once seemed so innocent started taking on a more creepy undertone. Just the day before, this girl was in the same fitting room as me with my tits out, while I was trying on bras. She has pictures of the three of us together on her mirror in her bedroom. I personally got out of that kind of thing in high school, but given the recent revelation, it just adds some ick in the mix. We've shared very intimate details about some of our lives, and I'm now wondering what's true and what's not. I called my fiance that night and asked if I could see him. Not because of what happened, I just missed him. He was thrown off by the story. He didn't know how to feel about it, and also said he wouldn't have known what he would have done if one of his buddies did that with him. I felt betrayed. Maybe I'm overreacting, but if I am, I'm not the only one. I guess nobody got hurt, but it was a creepy way of taking advantage of two people who were extremely vulnerable. I take a walk every morning as part of my waking up routine. This morning, toward the beginning of my walk, I passed a man who asked me something. He was standing slightly too close, not enough to make me uncomfortable, but close enough that I didn't want to slow down or listen to what he had to say. I had my earphones in and didn't take them out, but I heard enough to realize he asked me for the time. Without breaking my stride, I glanced at my watch, said 7:30, and kept walking. If he said anything else, I didn't hear it. About 20 or 30 minutes later, well beyond where I'd first encountered him, that same man walked up from behind me again, once more standing too close, and asked for the time. I told him to get away from me, to stop following me, and reminded him that I'd already given him the time earlier. That immediately escalated things. He shot back. Why? Is it because I'm black? I responded, no, it's because you approached me about a mile away with the same question. He claimed he lived in the neighborhood. I said that was fine, but asked him to stop following me. He denied following me and started hurling racial slurs, calling me a Ching Chong bitch and yelling for me to go back to China as I crossed the street to put more distance between us. The man followed me across the street, then again as I crossed back over. At this point, I was shouting for him to get away and stop following me, while he kept repeating the same lines, insisting he wasn't following me, claiming I was racist, and continuing to scream slurs. I started to worry that even though it was 8 a.m. and there were people around, parents walking their kids to school, commuters heading to work, no one would step in because of the bystander effect. After I crossed the street for a second time, he got right in my face, yelling that he wasn't following me. With my back against an apartment complex wall, I was afraid things were about to turn physical. Then, a tall woman with pink hair appeared. I don't remember exactly what she said, but at some point, I confirmed to her that he wouldn't leave me alone. She was about the same height as him, and immediately started yelling for him to stop following me. He started yelling back, repeating the same denials, claiming he was from the neighborhood and accusing us of racism. Thanks to my pink-haired savior, I was able to break away. A couple exiting their apartment, who had witnessed everything, asked if I was all right. I said yes without stopping. I walked half a block down and ducked into an alley, checking constantly to make sure he wasn't behind me. As I reached the other end of the alley, I saw the woman with the pink hair had disengaged and was walking away safely. I was so relieved that it hadn't escalated for her, and felt guilty that I didn't get the chance to thank her. I took a long route home, looking over my shoulder every few minutes. During college, I attended a university located far from any major city, surrounded by dense woods. There was a highly rated hiking route nearby called the Loyal Sock Trail, about an hour's drive from campus. I invited a friend to come with me since he had never been on an extended backpacking trip before. The trail was over 50 miles long, and we planned to cover it over a 4-day weekend. I'm an Eagle Scout who had spent countless hours in the woods and had gone on many backpacking trips throughout college. As anyone experienced in the outdoors will tell you, you get used to the little spooky things. Coyotes howling, raccoons rummaging at night, and the occasional unidentified noise. But the scariest thing you can encounter in the woods isn't wildlife, it's people. We were about 20 miles into the trail in Pennsylvania. The underbrush and trees grow densely along most trails, so I usually set up camp about 100 meters off the path to avoid disturbing others or being disturbed, especially in the mornings when I like to sleep in. Following that strategy, my friend and I found an amazing spot a good distance from the trail, tucked away where even our flashlights wouldn't be visible from the path. The site was on a small peninsula where a creek met a river, meaning there was only one way in and one way out. We built a fire, cooked dinner, and had a few drinks, but not enough for either of us to get drunk. Around midnight, we put out the fire and headed to our separate tents. Everything was quiet. It was fall, so leaves blanketed the ground. The moon shone brightly through bare branches, and the air was cool. The only sounds were the occasional rustle when my friend turned in asleep. Then I heard the voices. They sounded close, too close for being over 100 meters away on the trail. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. Who hikes at 3 in the morning, 20 miles deep in the woods? I slowly unzipped my tent, only to see my friend doing the same. He pressed a finger to his lips in an exaggerated hush and then pointed frantically toward the trail. That's when we saw them. 4 adults, 3 men and 1 woman, were walking directly toward our camp. They had no flashlights, no headlamps, nothing to light their way. They moved silently, deliberately. Only one of them carried a backpack, something that made no sense for a group already a third of the way through a long trail. On backpacking trips, I always bring wood-cutting tools to prepare firewood. For me, that meant a survival knife. I grabbed it, knowing it wasn't much of a defense, but it was all I had. The group stepped into our campsite, sat down by our extinguished fire pit, and just sat there. No words, no movement, just sitting in the moonlight. After what felt like forever, my friend broke the silence and asked what they were doing at our campsite. Instead of answering, one of the men asked if we had any food. We had packed light for the trip, but I grabbed an extra MRE-style meal from my bag and tossed it to him. I quickly followed with questions. Why they weren't using lights, if they needed help finding the trail, and why they were hiking so late. Their answers came one by one. We don't use lights. We know where the trail is. It's better to hike late at night. By then, every instinct in my body screamed that something was very wrong. My friend told them they needed to leave. They ignored the request and instead asked if we wanted to light the fire and hang out for a bit. We refused. Without another word, they picked up their single bag, stood, and quietly walked away, back into the woods. We stayed awake for the rest of the night, taking turns, watching just in case they came back. Neither of us slept more than a few minutes. When the sun finally rose, we both passed out for a few hours, exhausted. By afternoon, it all felt like some bizarre dream, until we noticed a fuzzy cap lying near the fire pit. One of them must have dropped it. I still have that cap. It's been 8 years since that trip, and I've never been back to the Loyal Sock Trail, and I don't think I ever will. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true creepy encounters. I'd like to acknowledge the rest of the members of Back to Ashes. Thank you so much for your continued dedication, as I always say, and I will continue to stand by it. Without you, I don't have a voice, and there would not be a Back to Ashes, and I would just be sitting here talking to myself. So thank you so much. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. Until next time, please stay vigilant and please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.